Sometimes people come in here and we talk about how bankruptcy can work for them, and it really can do some incredible things. It can stop your creditors dead in their tracks. It can strip a second mortgage and turn it into unsecured debt like credit card debt that you might not pay anything on. In other words, you would not, perhaps, dependent upon your circumstances, you wouldn't have to pay your second mortgage whatsoever. We can take the arrears on your first mortgage and or your second mortgage if that's what's appropriate, and pay it off over 36 to 60 months without interest. It's like an interest-free loan, but it's not a loan. It's just how the bankruptcy code works on your behalf. So a lot of really good things that bankruptcy can do for people who take advantage of it. The Founding Fathers, when they first formed the Constitution, directed Congress in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution to pass laws dealing with bankruptcy. It's been part of our Constitution and our government from the very get-go. And it was there for a reason. It was there to eliminate the possibility of debtors' prisons. It was there to give people a chance if they had difficulties in their life of getting a fresh start. And it was there at least many times for the reason of providing people who are entrepreneurs the incentive to try again if they failed, because failure is a part of business, and they wanted people to get up off their feet and try being entrepreneurial and starting other businesses. And many people that you know of have filed for bankruptcy. The simple one around the Detroit area is Henry Ford. They filed for bankruptcy in his first company. It was his second company that was the most successful and that you still hear about today. Donald Trump has filed multiple bankruptcies for a variety of corporations. He has not personally filed, but bankruptcy can be very helpful. Now, most people who come in here have issues with mortgages, and just today there was an individual here with a house that's worth $200,000 and he's got a $410,000 mortgage on it. The likelihood of his ever having equity in that home is slim and next to nothing. In fact, the articles that I've read about when the property values will recover in this area estimate recovery from 10 to 20 years and beyond in order to get back to where they were prior to the crash in 2008. That's a long time to wait, and it's a long time to pay a mortgage payment against a house that when you go to sell it, you'd have to bring dollars to the table. However, there is a way of leaving that property and leaving that mortgage, and it's through bankruptcy. Some people talk about, well, I want to walk away from my mortgage, or some people come in and say, my friend walked away from his mortgage. Well, walking away from a mortgage is probably not a good description to use. You really can't walk away from the mortgage because the mortgagee will come and find you with a lawsuit for whatever you owe them. So nobody really walks away from a mortgage. But if you deal with it in a bankruptcy, you can surrender the property back in a Chapter 7 with no liability whatsoever and no tax consequences. You can stay there for typically 7, 8, and even 9 months without paying on your mortgage, which allows a lot of people to recover from the consequences of what caused them to file bankruptcy in the first place, and perhaps even build a little cache of money that will allow them to buy a place on land contract or get into a place that's rent to own or something like that to begin getting back on their feet almost immediately. In Chapter 13, if you want to keep a property, as I said, you can get what's tantamount to an interest-free loan and stay in your property, or you can give up the property and give it back to the mortgagee there as well. In Chapter 13 there are different consequences, and it impacts what you have to pay in the plan if you have the money available, but it doesn't mean that you can't dispose of that property without tax consequences and without the necessity of trying to sell that property later on or being foreclosed later on and having to come up with money at a closing when you try to dispose of it. Now, many people, for instance right now, have been in their homes for many years, and they thought they'd have an equity in their home and they would use that equity for retirement. But that equity is gone. It's gone with the land values that have been so severely impacted in this area. Many homes are worth less than half of what people bought them for. And so right now people are paying on mortgages, and it's more or less a subsidized rent. And I say subsidized because the government allows you to take a tax deduction for the interest that you're paying. But even if that's the case, you know, the fact of the matter is that you're not building equity because the property has not recovered and more than likely will not recover for a period of time. So if you feel like the people who are in today that they should just leave the property and you want to get the tax consequences eliminated and you want to get the overall debt consequences taken care of, then you should seriously consider filing a Chapter 13, because in 5 years at the maximum, you'd have no debt associated with that house that you kind of walked away from, but which you actually treated to be surrendered in your bankruptcy, and you'd be set to begin a recovery and like in the circumstances of the people that are in today, start saving for retirement. Whereas if they had that $210,000 of debt hanging around their neck, they wouldn't be able to save for retirement, and they wouldn't be able to perhaps even have a retirement. So there are ways to deal with these issues. Bankruptcy is a very, very powerful tool for people who have problems like being underwater in their mortgage. And what we suggest that you do is come in to see us at Goodman & Associates. We provide free consultations with experienced bankruptcy attorneys. We'll tell you how it works. We'll tell you the straight stories. There won't be any myths or legends or street lore that you can rely on or need to rely on. You'll have the truth about bankruptcy and how we can help you with your mortgage and your underwater property, whether you want to give it up or whether you want to keep it. We'll make recommendations on how you can do both depending on what you want to do, and we'll tell you how we can help you, which I'm sure we can. That's Goodman & Associates. We're at 248-546-2800 or www.goodmanlaw.com.